After 1 month in the hospital, I returned home, only to learn my son gave my house away. Everything changed while I was in the hospital. I learned that before I even crossed the threshold. The taxi rolled to a stop in front of my 2-story house, the one Anthony and I had repaired with our own hands and our own paychecks, one careful project at a time. My hip throbbed under the bandage and the fresh scar, a pulsing reminder of the infection that had kept me trapped in antiseptic rooms far longer than anyone expected. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. Need help with your bags, ma'am? The driver asked, already stepping out. Just to the door, I said, adjusting my grip on the cane the physical therapist had insisted I carry. My son will take it from there. The words tasted familiar. My son. My only child. The boy I'd rocked through colic, the teenager I'd defended at school conferences, the man I'd helped through college and a first job and a first heartbreak. Even after Anthony died, even after the house felt too big for one set of footsteps, Richard had been the anchor I leaned on. It never occurred to me that an anchor could be used as a weapon. The front door opened before we reached the porch. Richard stood in the doorway. He didn't smile. His shoulders were squared like a guard's, not like a son welcoming his mother home. A slice of the living room showed behind him, movement and shadows. I caught a flash of blonde hair. Veronica. And beyond her, 2 strangers shaped by expensive clothes and quiet entitlement. I paused at the bottom step, my suitcase handle biting into my palm. Richard. I asked. What's? You shouldn't have come, he said. It was the wrong sentence. The wrong tone. Formal. Clean. As if he'd rehearsed it in front of a mirror. We were expecting you tomorrow, he added, eyes flicking to the driver as if he wanted witnesses to leave. The hospital said. The hospital released me today, I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. I called. You knew. Behind him, Veronica appeared beside his shoulder. She wore a white blouse tucked into tailored trousers, her hair glossy, her makeup perfect. It wasn't the effort that startled me. It was the jewelry. My emerald earrings. Anthony had given them to me on our 25th anniversary, a rare splurge, his proud smile when the jeweler opened the box. Those earrings were supposed to be in my bedroom drawer, nestled in velvet, close to the letters he'd written me during his business trips. Now they dangled from Veronica's ears like trophies. Isabella, she said, sweet as syrup. You look tired. You should really be resting. Resting. The word sounded like a command. The driver set my suitcase beside my feet and hesitated. I fumbled for my wallet, hands clumsy from medication and shock. I paid quickly, forcing myself to meet his eyes in a silent plea. Don't leave me. He gave a sympathetic nod, then retreated to the cab. The engine started. The taxi pulled away, and the street suddenly felt too quiet. Richard stepped forward, still blocking the entrance. There's no easy way to say this, he began. A chill went up my spine. Say what? He swallowed, then delivered it like a verdict. Things changed while you were hospitalized. This house is no longer yours. For a moment I thought I'd misheard. My ears still rang sometimes from the hospital monitors, from nights of fever. What are you talking about? I managed. Veronica's parents moved into view. Raymond Sterling was tall, silver-haired, with the posture of a man who expects rooms to make space for him. Claudia Sterling stood slightly behind him, her mouth pinched as if my presence offended her. I'd met them only a handful of times in 3 years, and each time they behaved as if my neighborhood were a temporary inconvenience their daughter had married into. Raymond spoke like he was announcing a business merger. We made arrangements. It's practical. Practical. My voice cracked. This is my home. Richard's jaw tightened. Veronica's parents needed to relocate from Dallas. This house has more space than you need. We've already handled the paperwork. Paperwork. The word hit me like cold water. I'd spent 21 years in bank compliance. Paperwork was never casual. It was a trail. It was evidence. It was the difference between truth and fraud. I didn't sign anything, I said. Let me in. Veronica's smile didn't reach her eyes. We've packed your personal belongings, she said. They're in boxes in the garage. We can send them wherever you're staying. Where I'm staying. The porch tilted slightly. I gripped my cane harder, the rubber tip squeaking against the wood. Richard, this is absurd. Move aside. He didn't. His voice sharpened. Power of attorney. The world narrowed. What? Remember those documents you signed before your surgery, he said. For medical decisions. They included financial authority too. I felt the blood drain from my face as the memory snapped into place. A stack of forms thrust in front of me in the pre-op room, my nerves jangling, my mind focused on anesthesia risks and recovery plans. Richard had leaned close, assuring me it was routine, just in case doctors needed permission for something. I'd trusted him. I'd scribbled my signature, page after page, without reading the fine print. You tricked me, I wanted to scream. But the words that came out were small. You used that. We're doing what's best, Veronica cut in, her voice silk over steel. This house is too much for you now. Senior living would be safer. And Richard has been managing everything for years. Managing. As if my life were a spreadsheet. Raymond's gaze swept over me with mild impatience. I'm sorry it came to this, he said, not sounding sorry at all. But it's legal. The transfer is done. The word legal was an insult, thrown at someone who knew the law too well to be fooled by it. Richard exhaled sharply, as if he'd reached the end of his script. Don't show up here again, he said. We'll send your things. The decision is final. For a second, I expected tears. Begging. My body felt primed for it, like a reflex. But something else happened instead. A freeze, yes, then a clarity hard and sharp, like the click of a lock. I looked at my son. I searched for the boy who used to run down this walkway, backpack bouncing, calling out for dinner. I found only a man holding a door closed. This is illegal, I said quietly. And you know it. It's done, he replied, cold as the hospital tiles. Don't make it harder. I nodded once. Enjoy it then. They blinked, thrown off by my calm. Veronica's smile faltered. Raymond's eyes narrowed. I turned away before they could see what shattered inside my chest. I walked down the steps slowly, each movement measured, not because of pain but because I refused to stumble in front of them. At the curb, I raised my hand. The taxi driver, who had pulled only a short distance away, must have been watching in his rearview mirror. He rolled back up, window lowering. You still need a ride? He asked gently. Yes, I said, and my voice stayed steady, which felt like a small victory. To the downtown hotel. When the door closed behind me, the quiet broke. My hands began to tremble. I pressed my discharge papers flat in my lap, as if I could smooth out reality with enough pressure. The hotel room smelled like detergent and stale carpet. It wasn't home, but it was private, and privacy was the one thing they couldn't steal from me in that moment. I sat on the edge of the bed, breathing. Through the ache in my hip, staring at my phone until the screen went dark. Then I typed one message. Plan B. Gloria Evans called before I could even set the phone down. Isabella, she said, and the fury in her voice warmed me more than any blanket. Tell me you're safe. I'm safe, I whispered. I'm not. I'm not home. You're at the hotel we talked about? Yes. I'm on my way. Gloria had become a lawyer with a reputation for dismantling lies. I'd become the person banks called when they wanted to avoid scandals. After Anthony died, she'd helped me put my affairs in order the way professionals do when they understand the world's quiet cruelty. Trusts, signatures, redundancies. I joked that she was paranoid. She'd raised an eyebrow and said, "No, Isabella. I'm prepared." An hour later, she knocked. When I opened the door, she pulled me into a careful hug, mindful of my injury. Her hair was silver now, pulled into her usual bun, and her suit looked sharp enough to cut glass. "Those vultures," she breathed. "All of them." I tried to smile. It wobbled. "They said it's legal." Gloria released me and snapped open her briefcase on the desk like she was entering court. "Let's start with what's true," she said. "What did you sign? What do you remember? What did they say exactly?" So I told her. Every sentence Richard had spoken. The earrings in Veronica's ears. The smugness in Raymond's voice. The boxes in the garage like my life had been reduced to storage. Gloria listened without interrupting, only her jaw working when I described the power of attorney. When I finished, she slid a folder toward me. "Anthony's trust," she said. "Remember? The one we updated after his diagnosis." I nodded slowly. My late husband had been meticulous. He'd loved me in practical ways, fixing a leak before it became a flood, building a plan before crisis arrived. "This house," Gloria said, tapping the page, "was placed in that trust. It cannot be transferred by a simple power of attorney. Not without proper trustee authorization. And you are not the only trustee." My breath caught. "You're a trustee too." "I am," she said, eyes hard. "And I never signed a thing." For the first time since the porch, relief cracked through the numbness. But it was fragile relief, the kind that comes with the knowledge that a fight is still ahead. Gloria continued, "We can challenge the transfer. We can file an emergency motion to freeze the property. But Isabella, there's more." My stomach tightened again. "More." She pulled out a printed statement. Bank transfers, dates, amounts. My professional brain absorbed the pattern before my heart could catch up. 5 transactions, Gloria said. Over $220,000. During your hospitalization. Routed to accounts you don't recognize. I stared. My hands steadied, not from calm but from anger, the kind that clears fog. "Digital signatures," I murmured. "Purportedly mine." Gloria nodded. "While you were in the ICU." My pulse thudded in my ears. "They didn't just take my house," I said slowly. "They're draining my accounts." "And," Gloria added, her voice dropping, "my assistant ran preliminary checks on Veronica's family. The Sterlings. Their so-called consulting business in Dallas has complaints that vanished right before investigations. Veronica has bounced between mortgage companies that later closed under regulatory heat. I don't like the pattern." The word pattern lit my mind like a match. In compliance, patterns were everything. The surface story was never the whole story. "Mortgage fraud," I said. Gloria's eyes sharpened. "That's my fear." I thought back over the past year, little moments I'd brushed aside. Veronica asking about my retirement accounts as if it were casual conversation, Richard inquiring about my bank contacts, Raymond's vague comments about investment opportunities and development districts. At the time, it had felt like ordinary greed. Now it felt like scaffolding. "Does Richard know?" I asked, and my voice was smaller than I wanted. Gloria didn't answer immediately, and in that silence I heard the truth. Maybe not every detail, but enough. Enough to block my door. Enough to tell me I had no place in the house Anthony and I built. I closed my eyes and let myself feel the betrayal fully, not as melodrama but as fact. The boy I loved had become the man who stole from me. When I opened my eyes again, something inside me had shifted. Not a wild desire for revenge, but a disciplined resolve, the kind that had carried me through audits and board meetings and crises no one else wanted to handle. "What do you want to do?" Gloria asked softly. "Everything," I said. "I want my home back. I want my money back. And I want this stopped, before they hurt anyone else." Gloria held my gaze, measuring me. Then she nodded once. "Then we do it smart. We document. We trace. We build a case so clean no one can wriggle out of it." My phone buzzed on the bed. A text from Richard. "Mom, We need the passwords to your investment accounts to transfer the remaining funds for your care. Send them as soon as possible. I showed it to Gloria. She laughed once, harsh and humorless. Of course. What do I say? I asked. Nothing, she replied. Let them think you're scared, or confused, or sleeping. Silence is a tool. I set the phone down. The old Isabella would have responded immediately, eager to soothe, to explain, to make peace. But the old Isabella had been left on the porch steps with her suitcase. I stared at the hotel mirror across from the bed. The woman reflected there looked tired, yes. Grey hair pulled back. Lines deepened by grief and stress. But the eyes were familiar. The eyes of someone who had spent a lifetime reading fine print, noticing what others missed. They think I'm powerless, I said. Gloria's smile was thin and fierce. Let them. I eased back against the pillows, the ache in my hip a steady reminder that I was still healing. But underneath the pain was something else, colder and stronger. They had taken my home while I was weak. They had counted on me staying weak. They were wrong. I wasn't looking for vengeance. I wanted proof, process, and a paper trail that would survive a lawyer's trick. If they'd built this trap with documents, I would unbuild it the same way. 3 days can stretch longer than 3 weeks when you spend them learning what your family did while you were too sick to stand. Sleep came in fragments, but my mind stayed awake, replaying Richard's flat voice at the door and Veronica's borrowed jewelry flashing like a warning. Instead, Gloria filled the room with paper. Statements. Access logs. Copies of the documents I'd signed before surgery. A timeline laid out in neat columns. She treated my betrayal like a case file, and I was grateful for the structure. Rage without structure burns itself out. Structure turns rage into leverage. On the 4th morning she slid her laptop across the table and said, "You have to see this." The screen showed property records. I leaned in, squinting at names and dates. "Third from the bottom," she said. The Miller family, 2 houses down from mine, had sold their house 3 months earlier. I remembered the farewell cookies Mrs. Miller had brought me, the way she'd hugged me and said they were moving closer to their daughter. At the time I'd been sad, but happy for her. The buyer listed on the record made my throat tighten. Sterling Investment Properties, LLC. That's not a coincidence, I said. Gloria clicked to another page. It gets better. The Hendersons across the street sold last month to the same buyer. And the corner house is already under contract. I stared as the pattern formed. They're buying the neighborhood. They're positioning, Gloria corrected. And here's why. She opened a document filed with the city planning department 2 weeks earlier, while I was still in the hospital. A zoning request. A proposal to change our block from single-family residential to mixed-use commercial. I felt my pulse pick up. Our neighborhood sat on the edge of Phoenix's expanding downtown district. Developers had been creeping closer for years, offering cash to homeowners who didn't want the hassle of repairs or property taxes. Most of my neighbors had resisted. We liked our trees, our porches, our quiet. But if the zoning changed, the values would jump. Not by thousands. By millions. They want enough of the block to force it, I whispered. Gloria nodded. Once they control a big chunk, they can push the plan, sway votes, pressure holdouts. Then they sell or develop at triple the price. My compliance brain did the math before she said it out loud. 15 to 20 million, I breathed. And they need seed money, Gloria said. Which explains the transfers from your accounts. The room felt smaller. The betrayal wasn't only personal. It was strategic. My home wasn't a sentimental prize. It was a headquarters. A staging ground. A respectable address tied to an elderly widow with a clean banking reputation. My identity was a tool. I pressed my fingertips to my forehead, trying to keep the dizziness away. What about their Dallas history? I asked. Gloria pulled another folder from her bag. An investigator friend dug into the Sterlings. Their pattern is predatory. They target vulnerable homeowners, especially seniors. They offer refinancing or help that looks generous on the surface. Then the paperwork is built to fail. The owners default. The sterlings swoop in and take the property cheap. Mortgage fraud. Elder exploitation. A business model designed around desperation. My mouth went dry. And they're doing it here. They've been planning it, Gloria said. Long before your surgery. I thought of the way Veronica had started asking about my neighbors, the way she'd complimented their gardens as if she was measuring lot sizes. I'd dismissed it as superficial chatter. Now it felt like scouting. What about Richard? I asked. My voice caught on his name. How deep is he? Gloria hesitated, then opened a video file. The grainy security footage showed the lobby of a bank I recognized instantly. Dallas First National, the place I used for my safe deposit box when Anthony and I did business in Texas years ago. In the video, Richard entered beside Veronica. They walked with the purposeful confidence of people who believed they belonged in private offices. They met with a loan officer. They spoke. Richard signed something. Veronica handed over a folder. The timestamp punched me in the chest. It was 2 days after my surgery, when I'd been heavily sedated in the ICU. He accessed your box, Gloria said quietly. The log confirms it. He removed the original deed, trust paperwork, and other documents. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. It was one thing to imagine Richard being manipulated. It was another to see him moving through a bank with calm intention while I lay unconscious. He knew, I said, voice flat. Gloria didn't contradict me. She only placed a hand over mine, grounding me to the chair. There's more, she said. Emails. A chain between Veronica and her father, 8 months old. I read the lines slowly, feeling the coldness behind the polite phrasing. They discussed opportunities in my neighborhood, pressure points in certain homeowners, timelines that depended on my health. One phrase made my skin prickle. Mother unlikely to fully recover from scheduled surgery. Accelerated timeline. Scheduled surgery, I whispered. They knew my hip replacement date. Gloria's voice was low. They were waiting for vulnerability. A memory surfaced, Veronica offering to drive me to pre-op appointments, insisting she wanted to help. Richard bringing forms to the hospital, telling me everything was routine. Raymond casually asking what date I'd be, under the weather, as if he were making small talk. The past rewrote itself in my mind, turning ordinary moments into stepping stones. I pushed the laptop away, inhaled slowly, and made myself speak. We take this to federal authorities. Gloria nodded. I already reached out. Financial crimes. If you're willing to cooperate, they'll listen. I wasn't eager to hand my life to agents in windbreakers. But I understood systems. And I understood that a network like this didn't collapse because an angry mother wanted her house back. It collapsed when evidence met jurisdiction. Fine, I said. But we do it my way. They don't get to rush me into mistakes. This is a significant pattern, Callahan said when I finished. Property fraud, identity misuse, possible elder exploitation. Possible. Gloria's eyebrows rose. He held up a hand. We have to prove it in court. But yes, this is serious. If we build it correctly, we can secure warrants, freeze assets, and stop further acquisitions. Rips leaned forward. We've been circling the sterlings in Texas. They're slippery. They use shell companies and clean-looking fronts. We need a moment when they speak too freely or put their hands directly on the evidence. I understood immediately. You want them on record, I said. Exactly, Rips replied. An admission. A document. A recorded plan. Something that ties the fraud to them, not just to paperwork they can blame on mistakes. Gloria glanced at me. Isabella has an idea. I exhaled. The idea had been forming since the first time Richard told me the house was no longer mine. They think I'm gone, I said. They think I'm frightened. They think I won't step foot near that house again. Rip's eyes narrowed. You're not suggesting. I'm suggesting I can get inside, I said. There's a side door to the kitchen. The lock sticks. It always has. Anthony and I joked we'd fix it one day. We never did. Callahan's expression tightened. That's risky. I know, I said. But I also know my house. Their habits. Veronica's routines. Raymond's ego. If they're using my study as an office, they'll talk there. And they'll talk like they already won. Gloria added, we can set safeguards. A panic alert. A team positioned close. Rip sat back, considering. We can't officially instruct you to put yourself in danger, she said. But if you choose to retrieve personal items from your home and you happen to record a conversation while you're there, that evidence can be admissible. She spoke like a woman who had said the same sentence in other cases, knowing exactly what it meant. We planned it like a bank operation. Timing, variables, contingencies. Veronica's salon appointment. Raymond and Claudia's real estate viewing. Richard's work schedule. The agents would be near, unmarked, ready to move if I triggered an alert. At the curb, a taxi dropped me 2 blocks from my street. I walked slowly, cane tapping rhythmically. The neighborhood looked the same, but I noticed everything with sharper eyes. A new for sale sign on a lawn I knew belonged to an elderly widow, a contractor's truck idling near the corner, the absence of my roses by my own walkway. Someone had removed them. Replaced them with generic plants that didn't mean anything. Erasure. I didn't go to the front door. Pride would have demanded it, but pride wasn't the point. Proof was. I circled to the side entrance and twisted the key. The lock caught, then gave. The door opened with the faintest groan. Inside, my kitchen smelled like a different detergent, unfamiliar and sharp. Someone had rearranged my counters. The dish towel hanging by the sink wasn't mine. I moved quietly toward the study. Voices drifted through the hall. The Miller closing is Friday, a male voice said. Raymond. Confident. Possessive. Once that's done, we control 40%, another man replied, younger, nervous. And the Henderson financing? The younger man asked. Raymond's laugh was low. Already handled. We used Mrs. Hayes's banking credentials. Clean as a whistle. My hands went cold. There it was. The admission, spoken like a joke. I slipped my phone from my purse and started the recorder, the red dot glowing in the corner of the screen. My heart hammered, but my face stayed still. In compliance, you learn to keep your expression neutral when someone confesses. I pushed the door open. The scene froze. Raymond sat behind Anthony's antique desk, my husband's chair, my husband's view out the window. A stranger stood near the bookcase, clutching a folder. Raymond's eyes widened. Isabella. Hello, Raymond, I said, calm as glass. Discussing business in my home? How did you get in? He snapped, standing. Through the door, I said. The same door I've used for 30 years. The younger man shifted toward the exit. Mr. Sterling, should I? No, Raymond began. I just need some personal papers, I said, cutting him off. I crossed the room to the filing cabinet, acting slower than I felt. The cane became a prop, a signal that I was frail. Frail people are underestimated. Underestimation is useful. Raymond's mouth twisted. This property is no longer yours. And yet, I said, sliding open the drawer, you're using my banking credentials to finance your acquisitions. His partner stiffened. What did she say? Raymond's face tightened. She's confused. She was hospitalized. She doesn't know what she's hearing. I turned, folder in hand, and met his gaze. My mind is clear enough to recognize fraud, Raymond. Clear enough to know you're using my identity. Clear enough to know you planned my vulnerability. The younger man backed away faster. I'm leaving, he muttered. Raymond's voice dropped into menace. You have no proof, Isabella. And even if you did, no one will believe you over your own son. Now get out before I call the police. I lifted my phone slightly, not obvious enough to provoke, but enough to remind myself the recording was running. You're right, I said. Proof matters. Raymond lunged. His hand clamped around my arm with bruising force. Pain flared up my hip as I stumbled. For one panicked second I feared the cane would slip and I would fall, helpless, and he would take the phone. Give it to me, he hissed, reaching for the device. Let go, I said loudly, letting my voice carry down the hall. Loudness was another tool. It created witnesses. It created timelines. The front door burst open. FBI. Hands where we can see them. Agents flooded the hallway like a wave, weapons drawn, jackets visible. Raymond froze mid-grab, shock flickering across his face before anger replaced it. His grip loosened. An agent yanked him back. Another took the phone from my shaking hand with gentle efficiency, already preserving it as evidence. Rips appeared at my side. Mrs. Hayes, she said, voice steady. Are you hurt? My pride, I managed, breathless. Not my proof. They cuffed Raymond and read him his rights. He sputtered insults, demanded lawyers, tried to regain control through volume. It didn't work. Control had moved to people with badges and warrants. I leaned against the doorframe, letting my heartbeat slow. The house felt both familiar and violated. The same wood floors, the same scent of old books, but now filled with strangers' voices and the heavy weight of federal procedure. Callahan approached with a notebook. That recording, he said, combined with the transfers and the property records, is enough. We can move on the rest of their network. I nodded, the satisfaction muted by the knowledge that the hardest part wasn't Raymond. It was the porch conversation replaying in my head, my son's voice saying, "This house is no longer yours." "Tonight," Rip said, "we execute warrants at your home and their other locations. Veronica will be questioned. Richard too." My stomach tightened. "He'll be there," I said, not a question. "We'll handle him carefully," Callahan replied. "But if he's involved, we have to treat him like any other subject." I looked past them into my study, at Anthony's desk turned the wrong way, my papers disturbed, my family history treated like office supplies. I thought of the roses ripped out front, of Veronica wearing my earrings, of Richard asking for passwords. They had tried to erase me. Instead, they had handed me the perfect evidence of their arrogance. As agents escorted me outside, the evening air hit my face like a reset. Neighbors were peeking from behind curtains now, drawn by the lights and movement. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. Across the road, Gloria waited beside an unmarked car. She opened the door for me, her expression fierce with pride and worry. "You did it," she whispered. "We did it," I corrected, settling into the seat. "Now we finish it." And somewhere inside my stolen house, footsteps moved through rooms that had once been safe, collecting proof that would decide what remained of my family when the dust finally settled. The FBI office was colder than I expected, not in temperature but in feeling. Beige walls, metal chairs, the hum of fluorescent lights. A place designed to strip emotion down to facts. That suited me more than I cared to admit. Agent Callahan closed his notebook and leaned back slightly. "Mrs. Hayes, the recording you obtained is extremely strong. Combined with the bank records and the zoning filings, we now have grounds for multiple federal charges." "And my house?" I asked. My voice surprised me by how steady it sounded. "An emergency freeze order has already been issued," he replied. "No sale, no transfer, no refinancing. No one can touch it until ownership is formally resolved." A breath I hadn't realized I was holding finally escaped my chest. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was regained. Gloria entered the room a moment later, her heels clicking sharply on the linoleum. She carried a stack of papers and an expression of controlled satisfaction. Dallas is moving too, she said. Warrants are being executed on Sterling offices there as we speak. I closed my eyes briefly. The scale of it all still felt unreal. A week ago, I'd been struggling to walk down hospital corridors. Now my life has exploded into federal investigations and criminal networks. What happens now? I asked. Rips answered this time. Tonight, we'll execute a full search at your residence. Mrs. Sterling will be taken in for questioning. Your son will be interviewed as well. The word son echoed unpleasantly in my mind. I want to be there, I said. Both agents looked at me. At the house, I clarified. When you go in. Callahan hesitated. That may be difficult emotionally. I've had difficult emotions already, I replied. This is my home. I won't watch from a distance. Rips nodded slowly. All right. But you stay with us. No exceptions. 3 hours later, I sat in the back of an unmarked vehicle parked across the street from my house. Dusk was settling, the sky streaked with bruised purples and gold. The porch light was on. Veronica's car sat in the driveway. My chest tightened. Richard wasn't supposed to be home yet. I had hoped, selfishly, that he wouldn't be present when everything collapsed. Hope, it turned out, had not learned its lesson. Agents moved with quiet efficiency, doors opening, radios murmuring. When the command came, it was calm and unmistakable. Federal agents. We have a warrant. The front door opened. From my vantage point, I saw Veronica first. Her posture stiffened, her face cycling rapidly from confusion to alarm. Then Richard appeared beside her, one hand instinctively moving toward her arm. My heart twisted at the sight of him, standing protectively, the same way he had as a child when he thought someone was being unfair to me. Then Veronica saw me. Her composure shattered. You, she shrieked. You did this. Richard followed her gaze. His eyes locked onto mine, widening in disbelief as he understood that I wasn't being escorted. I was accompanying them. Mom. His voice cracked. What's going on? Agent Callahan spoke before I could. Your mother has provided evidence of extensive financial fraud connected to the Sterling family. We are executing a search warrant on this property. Fraud. Richard repeated, shaking his head. That's impossible. There's been a misunderstanding. I stepped forward, cane tapping against the concrete, a quiet metronome. There's been theft, Richard. And forgery. And deception. Veronica lunged toward me, rage contorting her features. You had no right coming back here. I never left, I said calmly. You just locked the door. Agents moved in, guiding Veronica aside, separating her from Richard. Neighbors began to gather now, silhouettes on porches, whispers spreading like ripples through water. Mrs. Sterling, Rip said firmly, you're coming with us for questioning. I want my lawyer, Veronica snapped, her voice sharp but brittle. That's your right, Rips replied. As agents escorted her toward the vehicle, Veronica twisted around, her eyes burning into mine. You think you've won, she hissed. You have no idea what you've started. I know exactly what I started, I answered. You just didn't think I would. Richard stood frozen on the porch as agents streamed into the house, carrying equipment, photographing rooms, opening drawers. The home he had declared no longer mine was now a crime scene. Mom, he said hoarsely. Please. Let me explain. I stopped and turned to face him fully. For the first time since the hospital, I let myself look at him not as my son, but as a man accountable for his actions. You already explained, I said. At the door. He flinched. I didn't know everything. Did you know they were draining my accounts? His silence answered before his words did. Yes, he admitted. But Veronica said it was temporary. That it was for your care. And did you believe her? I asked quietly. Or did you want to? His shoulders sagged. I didn't want to look too closely. I nodded once. That's a choice too. As the agents worked, I stood across the street with Gloria beside me. She squeezed my hand, grounding me as the scene unfolded. "This is the hardest part," she murmured. "No," I said softly. "The hardest part was realizing my son would rather protect a lie than protect me." By midnight, the house was stripped of devices, documents, and anything resembling evidence. Veronica was gone. Richard was taken aside for formal questioning. Inside the FBI interview room, he looked smaller, stripped of confidence, his usual tailored appearance replaced by disarray. "I need you to understand," he began, voice trembling. "I never meant to hurt you. I studied him carefully. Intent doesn't erase impact, Richard." He swallowed. Veronica's parents had leverage over me. Financial leverage. I was already in trouble before all this. Gloria leaned forward. "What kind of trouble?" Richard hesitated, then exhaled. "Bad investments. I lost money. A lot of it. Raymond offered help. Loans. Opportunities. I signed things I shouldn't have. And the house?" I asked. He closed his eyes. "They said it was a test. That if I wasn't willing to put the house in their control, they couldn't trust me." A test. The word tasted bitter. "So you tested me instead," I said. He looked up sharply, tears brimming. "I didn't see it that way." "No," I replied. "You wouldn't." Days blurred together after that. Statements. Depositions. Forensic accounting. Each document confirmed what my instincts already knew. The Sterling's operation was vast, calculated, and ruthless. And then Agent Rips called. "There's something else," she said, her tone different this time. "Something you need to see." The photographs slid across the table toward me and made my breath hitch. They showed a hospital room. An ICU bed. Me. Unconscious. "These were found in a hidden safe in Raymond Sterling's Dallas office," Rips explained. "Along with your medical records." "How?" Gloria demanded. "We're investigating that," Rips said. "There's evidence of unauthorized access to your charts." My stomach turned. Why would they need that? Gloria leaned closer, scanning the notes. "Isabella, look at the medication adjustments. A dosage change. Handwritten. Not standard. The infection that prolonged your stay," Rips said carefully. "We are now investigating whether it was intentionally induced." The room seemed to tilt. "Are you saying," I whispered, "that they tried to keep me hospitalized?" "Yes," Rips replied. "To buy time." A cold, visceral horror spread through me, eclipsing even the betrayal. Theft I could understand. Greed I had seen before. But this crossed into something darker. "Does Richard know?" I asked. "We don't believe so," Rips said. "But there's more." She placed another document on the table. A life insurance policy. My name. Richard is listed as beneficiary. Taken out 6 months earlier. My heart pounded painfully. "He signed this." "The signature may be forged," Rips cautioned. "We're still analyzing." When Richard was confronted with the evidence later that day, his reaction told me more than any expert testimony ever could. He went pale. He shook. He looked genuinely horrified. "Oh God," he whispered. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." And for the first time since this nightmare began, I believed him. He had been complicit. Weak. Self-serving. But he had not been monstrous. That distinction mattered more than I wanted it to. Richard agreed to cooperate fully after that. His testimony unraveled the Sterling network faster than anything else could have. Accounts were traced. Properties were flagged. Victims came forward. 17 properties. 3 states. Dozens of families. And a nurse. Her name was Miranda Jenkins. She confessed. She admitted to manipulating my medication, to introducing a controlled infection, to prolonging my recovery under direct instruction from Raymond and Veronica Sterling. "They told me not to kill you," she said in her statement. "Just slow you down." The words made me physically ill. Attempted murder was added to the charges. When the case finally paused long enough for me to breathe, I stood in my living room again for the first time. The house felt bruised but familiar, like a body after illness. Curtains wrong. Furniture shifted. Scars everywhere. But it was mine. As night settled and the agents left, Gloria poured us tea and sat beside me on the porch swing Anthony had built years ago. "You survived," she said quietly. I looked out at the darkened street, the oak tree at the corner, the homes that had nearly been erased by greed. "Yes," I said. "And now I intend to make sure no one else has to." The storm had broken. The reckoning had begun. And I was no longer afraid of what came next. 2 weeks after the raid, the world slowed down just enough for the weight of everything to finally land. Until then, momentum had carried me. Meetings, interviews, documents, signatures, hearings. Each day had a clear purpose. Respond, clarify, confirm. Action is a powerful anesthetic. It dulls pain by postponing it. The pain waited patiently. It arrived one quiet morning when I stood alone in my kitchen, staring at the empty space on the windowsill where my orchid had always lived. Veronica had taken it. Why that small living thing mattered more than the furniture or the jewelry surprised me, but grief doesn't follow logic. That orchid had survived 5 years, 2 moves, and Anthony's death. It had bloomed again and again with stubborn generosity. Now it was gone. I lowered myself into a chair, the cane resting against the table, and let myself feel the loss fully for the first time. Not just of objects, but of certainty, of trust, of the illusion that love alone protects you. That afternoon, Gloria arrived with an expression I had learned to read, professional calm layered over something heavier. "There's a request," she said gently, setting her bag down. "From Richard." I didn't answer immediately. "He's being transferred to a minimum security facility pending trial," she continued. "He's asked to see you before that happens." The words stirred a storm of emotions I wasn't ready to name. Anger flared first, sharp and defensive. Then sorrow. Then something quieter, more dangerous. Longing. "I don't know if I can," I admitted. "You don't have to," Gloria said. "No one would blame you if you refused." I stared at the tables wood grain, following the lines as if they could tell me what to do. "I need answers," I said finally. "Not excuses. Answers." The interview room at the federal building felt sterile and unforgiving. A metal table. 2 chairs. A mirror that was almost certainly one way. Gloria sat beside me, her presence steadying. When Richard entered, I barely recognized him. He looked smaller, as if the weight of his choices had physically compressed him. His clothes were plain, his hair unstyled, dark circles bruising the skin beneath his eyes. He hesitated before sitting down, like a child unsure whether he was still welcome at the table. "Mom," he said quietly. "Richard," I replied. Silence stretched between us, thick and awkward. This wasn't a courtroom. There was no script. "I never wanted it to go this far," he began, voice rough. "Veronica said it was temporary. That once everything was settled, you'd be taken care of." "Taken care of," I echoed. "You mean removed?" He flinched. "I didn't think of it that way at the time." "That's the problem," I said calmly. "You didn't think." He nodded, tears threatening. "I know." Gloria watched silently, allowing the space to remain mine. "Why?" I asked. "Not why you signed papers or moved money. Why you stood in that doorway and told me I had no place in my own home." Richard's hands trembled slightly. "Because by then, I was already trapped. Raymond had proof of earlier deals I'd been involved in. Things that could destroy me. Veronica made it clear that if I hesitated, they'd make sure I took the fall alone." "And you chose yourself," I said. "Yes," he whispered. I did. The admission was devastating in its honesty. I lost money years ago, he continued. Bad investments. I panicked. I didn't tell you. I didn't tell Dad when he was still alive. Raymond offered a way out. At first it felt like help. Then it became leverage. And you never thought to come to me, I said. Or your father. He shook his head. I was ashamed. Shame. Another powerful anesthetic. Another way people postpone pain until it explodes. And the power of attorney? I asked. That was Veronica's idea, he admitted. She framed it as protection. I didn't read everything carefully. I trusted her. Like I trusted you, I said quietly. He looked up then, meeting my eyes, and something broke in his expression. I know, he said. And that's what I'll live with. We sat in silence again, the weight of history pressing down on the present. There's something you should know, Gloria said finally, stepping in. Richard has agreed to cooperate fully with the prosecution. His testimony is critical. I know, I replied. They told me. Richard nodded. I'll tell them everything. Not to save myself, though I won't pretend that doesn't matter, but because what they did, what they planned to do to you, he swallowed hard. I can't be part of that. I studied him carefully. The compliance officer in me looked for inconsistencies. The mother looked for truth. I found both failure and sincerity. They nearly killed me, I said. His face crumpled. I didn't know. If I had. But you didn't want to know, I interrupted gently. That's the line you crossed. He nodded, accepting the distinction without argument. When the meeting ended, I felt drained rather than relieved. Answers don't heal wounds. They simply define them. That night, I returned to my house alone for the first time. The FBI had cleared the property. Evidence removed. Locks changed. Silence restored. The house felt like a body after surgery. Familiar, but altered. I walked through each room slowly. The living room where Anthony and I had argued and laughed. The kitchen where he'd burned toast every Sunday. The study where his desk now sat returned to its rightful position, facing the garden. I sat in his chair and let my hand rest on the worn wood. I'm still here, I whispered to the empty room. Sleep came fitfully, but it came. The next weeks unfolded with grim efficiency. Charges were filed. Plea negotiations began. News outlets sniffed around, but Gloria shielded me from most of it. The story was irresistible. Betrayal, elder fraud, family collapse. But I refused to let my life become entertainment. The nurse, Miranda Jenkins, pleaded guilty. She admitted to manipulating medications not only in my case, but in two others connected to Sterling Investments. Both patients had died. Their cases were reopened. Veronica and her parents were offered plea deals to avoid trial. Faced with overwhelming evidence, they accepted. Raymond Sterling received 20 years. Claudia Sterling received 15. Veronica received 18. The numbers felt abstract. Years reduced to digits. Punishment measured in calendars. Richard accepted his own plea deal, 5 years, with the possibility of parole after 3 for cooperation and good behavior. When Gloria told me, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Not because my son would suffer, but because the chaos had an endpoint. Consequences, however painful, create boundaries. Boundaries allow rebuilding. I visited Richard once more before his transfer. The detention center visitation room was brighter than I expected, painted in pale colors meant to soothe. Richard wore a standard uniform now, the fabric hanging loosely from his frame. I wanted to give you something, I said, reaching into my purse. I pulled out an envelope, yellowed slightly with age. Your father wrote this, I said. Before he died. He asked me to give it to you when you needed it most. Richard's hands shook as he took it. He stared at Anthony's handwriting as if it were a relic. I didn't know, he whispered. He wrote several, I said. This one was for you. I watched as he read, his face shifting, pain, shame, then something steadier. When he finished, he pressed the letter to his chest for a long moment. Thank you, he said. I don't deserve this. Deserving has nothing to do with it, I replied. It's yours. When I left that day, I felt no forgiveness yet. But I felt the first fragile edge of understanding. Not absolution. Not reconciliation. But recognition of shared humanity beneath betrayal. Months passed. Spring returned to the neighborhood. The roses were replanted. The garden revived. Neighbors checked in more often now, drawn together by what we'd nearly lost. A quiet pact formed, watchfulness, shared meals, mutual protection. I found myself speaking at community meetings about elder fraud, about paperwork, about trust. Not as a victim, but as a witness. Purpose emerged where trauma had lived. One afternoon, sitting on the porch with Gloria, I said aloud what had been forming in my mind for weeks. I want to expand Anthony's foundation. She looked at me, intrigued. In what way? Elder protection, I said. Legal education. Financial safeguards. Support for people who don't have the resources I did. Gloria smiled softly. That sounds like you. It sounds like him too, I replied. That night, as I sat at Anthony's desk outlining plans, I felt something close to peace for the first time since the hospital. The betrayal had broken something essential in me. But in the break, space had opened. For clarity. For purpose. For a future not defined by what was taken, but by what I chose to build next. And I knew the story wasn't over yet. One more chapter remained. 6 months passed quietly, which felt like a miracle. Not the fragile quiet of denial, but the earned quiet that comes after storms exhaust themselves. The kind of quiet where mornings return to routines and nights no longer replay worst moments on an endless loop. The house healed first. Not structurally, it had always been solid, but emotionally. I moved slowly through each room, restoring rhythms rather than appearances. Anthony's desk went back to its rightful place by the garden window. The sofa cushions were turned and beaten into familiarity. I replaced the curtains Veronica had chosen with ones I loved, soft fabric that filtered sunlight instead of blocking it. I bought a new orchid for the windowsill. It wasn't the same one, but it bloomed anyway, stubborn and generous. Gloria came often during those months, sometimes with documents, sometimes just with groceries and conversation. She never pushed. She understood that healing is not a linear process but a negotiation with memory. That chair suits you again, she said one afternoon, watching me read on the porch. It always did, I replied. I just forgot. The legal proceedings concluded more efficiently than I expected. When greed is documented properly, it tends to confess quickly. The Sterling operation collapsed completely. Properties were returned or compensated where possible. A restitution fund was created for victims who had lost homes or savings. The city withdrew the rezoning proposal entirely, and my neighborhood organized its own association, one that prioritized transparency and mutual protection. I attended the final sentencing hearing quietly, sitting in the back row. I didn't want closure theatrics. I wanted accuracy. When the judge read the sentences aloud, I felt no satisfaction. Only finality. Raymond Sterling stared straight ahead, arrogance stripped away. Claudia wept silently. Veronica, my former daughter-in-law, looked at me once. Her gaze was calculating even then, as if she was still searching for leverage. She found none. Richard's case concluded shortly afterward. 3 years. Minimum security. Mandatory restitution contributions once released. His lawyer asked, carefully, whether I wished to submit a victim impact statement specifically addressing his sentencing. I declined. Not out of mercy. Out of clarity. The court had everything it needed. My words would not change the facts, and I refused to let my pain be used as punctuation in someone else's legal argument. Instead, I wrote Richard a letter. Not forgiveness. Not condemnation. Truth. I told him what he had broken. What could never be restored. What might still be rebuilt with time, discipline, and honesty. I told him I would not shield him from consequences, but I would not deny his humanity either. I mailed the letter without rereading it. Some things should not be edited. On a warm spring afternoon, Gloria sat across from me at the kitchen table as I signed the final documents to expand the Anthony Miller Medical Research Foundation. "You're sure about this?" she asked. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "This isn't reactionary. It's deliberate." The new division focused on elder protection, legal education, financial literacy, emergency legal response for seniors facing exploitation. We partnered with community centers, libraries, and banks. I trained volunteers myself, teaching them what to look for: pressure language, sudden changes in documents, isolation tactics. "People assume predators look dangerous," I told the first workshop group. "They rarely do. They look helpful, charming, reasonable." The work grounded me. Pain that finds purpose loses some of its poison. One evening, as I watered the garden, my neighbor Eleanor waved from across the street. She crossed over with a plate of lemon bars and a conspiratorial smile. "Book club wants to know if you'll host next month," she said. "They miss your living room." I smiled. "Tell them yes." Community had changed meaning for me. It was no longer background noise. It was armor. Later that night, alone at Anthony's desk, I opened his old notebook, the one where he used to sketch plans and jot down thoughts that occurred to him while drinking tea. I found a sentence he'd written years earlier, almost forgotten. "Healing doesn't erase scars. It teaches you how to carry them." I traced the words with my finger. Richard wrote from prison regularly. Never asking for forgiveness. Never making excuses. He spoke about classes he was taking, books he was reading, the monotony of routine. Sometimes he asked about the house. About the garden. I answered selectively. Not as punishment. As boundaries. When he requested a visit again, months later, I surprised myself by agreeing. Not immediately. But eventually. The visitation room felt less foreign this time. Richard looked healthier. Leaner. Quieter, more contained. Prison had stripped away performance. "I don't expect anything from you," he said early in the visit. "I just wanted to say I'm trying to become someone who wouldn't do what I did." I believed that he believed it. Whether belief would survive time remained to be seen. "Trying is a beginning," I said. "Consistency is the test." He nodded. Before leaving, he asked one question. "Are you happy, Mom?" I considered it carefully. "I'm at peace," I said. "That's better." On my birthday, 6 months after everything had ended, Eleanor sent flowers. Gloria brought cake. Neighbors stopped by with cards and stories. The house filled with voices and laughter again, not forced, not nostalgic, present. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone on the porch swing, the one Anthony built, listening to the cicadas hum in the trees. I thought about the woman I had been before the hospital. Trusting. Unquestioning. Certain that love was protection enough. That woman was gone. But she hadn't been replaced by bitterness. She had been replaced by wisdom. I had learned that betrayal doesn't only come from enemies. That paperwork can be more dangerous than knives. That silence can be weaponized and reclaimed. Most of all, I learned that survival is not the same as living. Living requires choice. I chose to stay in my house. I chose to face my son without illusion. I chose to transform harm into protection for others. The scar remained. It always would. But it no longer defined me. As I turned off the porch light and went inside, I felt something close to gratitude. Not for what had happened, but for what I had become because I refused to disappear. The door closed behind me, not as a barrier, but as a boundary I now understood how to defend. And for the first time since the hospital, I slept without fear of what might be taken next, because I knew exactly who I was. And I knew how to protect it.